What's up, YouTube? Roachsaurus here, back with another video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the lead developer from Starfield quits, says he has no regrets. What is this about? Let's check it out.
Let's go!
You know what absolutely blows? Being a cog in the machine. Now, in this video, we detail the fallout of the mid and post-COVID studio gold rush, where AAA vets were being thrown cash only for investors to, in not that long, flinch, and entire studios have been going under. And that's sad news if you, like me, were excited by the idea of Mass Effect's director and its lead creative running two separate studios, both trying to make a science fiction RPG.
I'm going to take a look at Ubisoft, for example. If they keep it up, they're going to be going under soon, too. Yeah, they got Deceive Inc. Studios shutting down. They have several employees from Ubisoft getting laid off. Over 300 people, or nearly 300 people affected by that. What else? They have Avalanche closing Montreal and New York offices. Paladin Studios shutting down after 19 years. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
That was very sad. Now, today is a bit of a different speed, but it's one that is actually still sparked by science fiction. In this case by Starfield, and one man who looked around him at Bethesda and thought, screw this, I cannot hack it anymore, and he went indie. And the big point is he is not the only one. This is a bit of a trend. The game industry is actually changing, and this time it doesn't actually look like the doomed gold rush that was inflicted by those dangerously alluring 0% interest COVID-era dump trucks full of money that of course just, turned out to betray everybody. I don't have one of those dump trucks of money. The big finding of this video is best started with a personal story. This is Nate Perkapile. Now, he left Bethesda Game Studios during the development of Starfield, and it's not like he was a small fry. He was a lead on that project, and recently he was the focus of this piece by Jason Schreier. And to be honest, he paints a picture.
After era of bloat, veteran video game developers are going smaller, and I don't blame them. I mean, this can go back to what I was saying in other previous videos as well. Major corporations have a higher chain of command and a lot more lengthy process, where when you're trying to pass ideas around and concepts, a lot of things get rejected. In these indie game studios, you can make more of those risky choices and be more creative and have fun with it. Potentially make a greater game, which we've been seeing in a lot of cases in smaller studios.
Picture that is my own personal hell. So he had this to say, quote, "I can pretty safely say there's not a single day I've ever contemplated going back." Another quote is this great one. "That scale of production is not necessarily enjoyable for a lot of people. You're very much a cog in the machine."
Yep.
Now, the reasons why he wouldn't want to go back is, well, because it seems soul-crushing. In his capacity as a lead dev working on Starfield, he had 20 meetings a week. Now, that is the sort of thing that, in a way, you might need to do to keep teams and teams of people, teams totaling multiple hundreds, aligned on a project. And frankly, when you look at Starfield from a content perspective, I think you can tell that too many people were making it. Now, for Nate, he says that this was nothing like his time working on Fallout 3 or Skyrim, and those were done with teams under 100 people. And there is a point there that's not the main one of this video, but I still need to mention it. Time and time again, we're seeing some smaller teams disrupt. And yeah, sure, there's outsourcing involved in all sides.
I think it gets to a point where there's way too many people working on one project that so many ideas get thrown into like a video game, and it just doesn't make sense anymore. I think that's kind of what I'm getting from this.
Well, absolutely holds for the big players, but here's just one example. Grinding Gear Games has got under 200 people. Diablo 4 was Blizzard's largest internal team at a point where we knew that World of Warcraft was like 550 to 600 people. Over 600 people. Now, it is true, there is less Path of Exile 2 than there is Diablo 4. Diablo 4 is really big because it was made by so many people, but what one do people seem to respect and enjoy more? I think there is something to be said for smaller teams, and if we were to return to Nate, to Oblivion, and the ones he worked on, like Fallout 3 and Skyrim, well, all of those games were peak Bethesda jank, because it's Bethesda, they're never not going to be that. But they came with a Bethesda character that I think, and seemingly in most people's opinion, Starfield kinda lacked. Now, Nate has decided to become an indie, a one-man band indie. He's using Unreal Engine 5, and he actually just released his
So he's developing all of his own games himself.
game. The game is called The Axis Unseen and it's billed as a heavy metal horror. It's got a demo, it costs £19.99 and it has 180 reviews with an overall score of 80% in Steam. Now, that is by no way a runaway hit. It will not be purchasing Nate Lambos, but that's actually why it is a good thing to talk about in today's video. Survivorship bias could make it look like you can just go indie, put together a few nice things from, common tools we'll get into soon, and just print money. That's absolutely not the case. The games industry is still extremely hard. I'm going to crunch some numbers based on my own experience and what's kind of seen as like common industry wisdoms. So it used to be that you would average like 50 sales, maybe 55 sales per Steam review. These days, the common wisdom is not as great. It's more like 35. Now, in this game's case, that would come out to 6,300 sales. Now, I'm just going to model this in USD, which to be honest is going to be optimistic. And looking at the pricing data, we can see that bar a 10% launch sale, there has not been a discount. So let's just assume 3/4 of sales were during the launch discount period, and that would put revenue at $145,629. It released October 22nd, 2024, which means that as of the time of me finalizing this video script, we have 47 days worth of sales. But of course, that is just top revenue. Steam refund rates tend to roll between 10% and 15%. Let's be nice and just take 10% of that revenue off, which brings us down to $131,066. But
I mean, that's still not bad, especially for a solo.
then there's Steam's 30% cut. That occurs after other chargebacks, refunds, etc. And that would bring Nate down from $131K to $91,746.
Still good.
Now, when working with a publisher, I was told that basically you can count on seeing 50% of the Steam top-line revenue number actually trickle through into what you will get. Now, by you,
I know in a lot of cases, publishers will fund you the money for the development of the game and funds that you need to obviously pay your bills and things like that ahead of time. So like they'll loan you, say, if they think the game's gonna sell for 100K, they'll loan you like 100K, hoping to get that back in a return there from profit sales, and then you obviously just pay the publisher back.
I don't mean literally
But it's not in all cases, obviously.
you, the developer. I mean that your publisher gets, and then it will go through whatever deal you've got with your publisher. And of course, for Nate, that's pretty good because he's self-published. Now here, even me just modeling a 10% refund rate is actually very optimistic, especially because this game is, well, an 80% user review, and it did have Unreal Engine 5 related issues on AMD cards because, yeah, it is current year, and there are sometimes AMD video card driver issues. I guess that'll just never not be true. And then, of course, Nate will have to deal with various different taxes and expenses. I'm not a US tax expert, or for his state specifically, but by this stage, I think you get the picture. Axis Unseen took 3 years to develop. It's largely a solo effort, but when you go through the credits, you do see soundtrack, localization, some art, animations, etc. were worked on by other people, all of which will have incurred cost. Suffice to say, if you were modeling an hourly rate across 3 years of 40-hour work weeks, it's not looking particularly amazing, although he does have one thing in his favor, and that is an epic mega grant which will have helped with the funding of this game project. And it does make sense because it's actually what takes us to the main topic of today's video. In this, it's Unreal, and looking through the interviews, it's clear that the likes of the Quixel Megascan assets were a humongous force multiplier for at least this one dev. Now, in a way, this does all seem kind of depressing, right? This is a positive to mixed launch from an experienced developer who got strong enough press because just his story inherently, and did do some of the indie festivals. But of course, it's only 47 days after. Nate has not done a deep enough discount to actually trigger the mass notification of wishlisters. That's how that works in Steam. Or any of the storefront visibility that you're going to get once you, take part in, say, the Steam Winter Sale. And taking a glance through the game's updates, it's pretty clear he's been responding to loads of feedback, which should mean that whenever it is time to hit the big sale button, there will be way more revenue. And that means a game like this can be an asset to his studio for 5, 10 years, maybe more. The point, though, is it's no overnight success, but I want you to take that in the context of the interview with Jason Schreier. He says he has not thought of going back. That's a sentiment that matters, and if you think about it, nobody's going to fire him for missing a revenue target. There are no investors that are going to rotate from the game sector into the AI.
I mean, you could obviously fund the game through like a GoFundMe as well. Like if you have an audience or like a community that supports the game, They have that as well that can fund the game. And then obviously you can get your grants through the publishers and get paid ahead of time for the development of all the hours and days that you're going to be spending working on the game. That way you're not going broke while you're making the game.
Sector and just leave you in the lurch. And going through the literature, one of the largest contributors to people's sense of burnout is a lack of perceived control over their circumstances. And I think the real cost of 20 meetings a week, which I'm sure for a lot of people is actually quite light, it's not in dollars, it's in the will to live. So we have this one story, but there are so many more examples. So let's zoom out and tackle the industry and the sorts of game successes we can be seeing. Here's a pretty cool thing. 3 of 2024's top-rated games are small-scale indies, actually small-scale. They're Balatro, The Crimson Diamond, and Animal Well. I didn't say top-selling, I said top-rated. Another example is UFO 50 that's loved, another one is Vampire Survivors Ode to Castlevania. Each one is doing something that is distinct, and it's coming directly from the personal interest of the people behind those games. Rather shocking.
By the way, I love Vampire Survivors. I love just how quick you can jump into a game and just start playing it. It's very arcade-like. I usually pull this game up when there's a lot of downtime on my streams, like when I'm playing with other people and they're busy at the moment, like using the restroom or they have to take a phone call or something. I'll pull this game up usually during a stream or Halls of Torment, which is very similar. And I'll go ahead and just play something to keep the audience occupied.
And that channels the energy that the Larian founder Sven brought to the Game Awards, where he basically TLDR said, the best games come from people who actually want to make them, not the executives and the marketing trends.
Exactly.
He's absolutely right. And for a lot of these small-scale indies, we're very much seeing that. There's a lot to say about tooling in this video.
Yeah, I think because another factor that plays in like a lot of smaller gaming companies versus the big corporate mega companies is the mega corporate companies are mainly about profit and money, whereas the smaller indie companies, they're more about the passion and just the fun of making the games and the heart that they put into the development of and design of the games. I mean, you can totally tell the difference. Undertale is an example. I mean, there's a million examples here that I could name off.
But pure personal passion and the desire to make that specific game, that is the ultimate force multiplier. One of those ones that's just damn hard to hire for because, for these people, the game's theirs. And a perfect example is Manor Lords, a hit from earlier this year. It was in large part done by one man, along with a band of freelancers and a publisher that backed the vision and didn't force the game out the door too early. And in every case with these games that I've mentioned, they were doing something different. Take with Manor Lords. We know that was him just wanting to make his personal dream city builder. And it's something he was able to do, down to one major change in our industry over the past number of years, and that is tooling. Both Axis Unseen and Manor Lords were made in Unreal Engine. Now, Unseen Axis was made using, full-fat AAA tools. Nate was using easily accessible virtual reality sculpting tools and ready-made terrain solutions, the sorts of things that, if you just look at the Unity store, you'll see loads of them. And a big Unreal Engine 5 feature came in clutch for him. It's called Nanite, and it was one of the more impressive things from the presentation that basically blew everybody's minds that unveiled UE5. With Nanite, he could import hyper-detailed models that maybe were intended or originally made for film or really for anything. He could put those models in, he could use those mega scan textures, and the engine would just handle it. Now, if you're not really coming from a game engine background or whatever, you may think, well, yeah, of course, you got your 3D model, you put it in the game, there it is, it's in the game, and there we go. That's not exactly how it works. In days gone by, there were whole stages of that pipeline where a lot of people were doing manual optimization work to get that kind of thing actually feasible in a game.
This is definitely, probably optimization for sure, of course. This is something I can't really touch on. I haven't really delved into 3D gaming yet, 3D game design. I have definitely messed with 2D though.
It's a major evolution because the engine just
from what I hear, it's kind of a whole different ballgame.
Impressive. Now we can also take Greg, the developer of Manor Lords. He started off using RPG Maker and then he moved to Unreal. And just like Nate, he was heavily crediting the availability of, example, free resources like Epic's Megascans. I don't know if they're free right now, but at least for a decent while there, Epic were just giving them all away for free. And to quote from Greg, talking about these things, he says, "These are the most crucial features of developers that don't get talked about much." So that's the main thing as, as consumers for us to know. Tools like this are actually enabling a level of solo or just extremely small indie development that in terms of visual fidelity, and that means in terms of actually game concepts even being possible, well, they can actually strike against the larger teams. That's especially important when we have an industry full of AAA veterans who at this stage may be pretty damn tired of AAA. Just take a look at a few of these visuals from Axis Unseen. That kind of thing was not possible, feasibly anyway, for a solo dev until this era. And the good thing is this new age of tooling is particularly well timed. I led this video with bad news, right? The various examples of AAA veteran-led studios have been struggling. I mean, Stormgate, it's one I really want to succeed, but they've struggled.
I've never even seen this
Nightingale
game.
struggled. That studio saw substantial layoffs. They were an ex-BioWare studio, and two other ex-BioWare veteran studios basically just went under because the funding walked away.
There's another studio.
Those are, I think, to the last, expensive.
Oh yeah, Origin. Yeah, they had their own launcher too.
To leverage ex-AAA talent to wrestle some control away from the big incumbents. But the examples you've seen in today's video are different. They're focused, specific, financially efficient, and previously, only certain types of indie games could exist because of some things that were just inherent to tooling. Manor Lords is a perfect example. I have to assume Greg did not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars making custom assets and textures for...
No, not a chance, especially if he's a solo dev. Unless you're already like rich and you have that much money just lying around, no, there's no way. I mean, it's possible he could have got maybe half of it from funding, but not thousands and thousands of dollars.
Absolutely everything. And that's the real superpower. You don't need to hire as many bespoke roles. You can literally get off-the-shelf systems that cover just about anything on Epic and Unity stores. And that means that the creative force behind a game can spend more of their time on the actual game bit, what will really make things fun for a player. And writ large, it's an interesting thing with how economies develop. At first, you need a hell of a lot of just raw manpower, but then you get more advanced tooling, you get more advanced workflows that increase productivity. But as companies grow, inefficiencies creep in. It's hard to keep talent density high in a company when you've got hundreds and hundreds of people. And suddenly the leads, who in the case of Nate, are the people that made your Fallout 3s and your Skyrims. Well, now, what are they doing? They're having over 20 meetings a week. Just think of the context switching penalty, the lack of focus, the impact on the number of deep work sessions that are even possible within a week. Suddenly, what got you to where you are has been watered down and assaulted by the structure of your company and the structure of your production. It's one of those things that's extremely hard to quantify, but I think it's actually one of the main reasons.
He's 100% right about this, by the way. This is what I was talking about, where a million things have to go through the chain of command, and you got 20 meetings, and all this focus gets taken off the development of the game. And I think it ultimately just kills morale too, in general. And then people just, they're just not into it anymore.
Why a lot of big games these days are struggling to hit as hard as they should. I mean, a lot of people, they look at an Ubisoft game and they just start to feel the sludge. Well, some of that's always going to be the case. Those games are made by teams where 600, as was Star Wars Outlaws, is actually a small internal team. And so when we look at today's video, the subjects of this piece, they don't really prove that success is a guaranteed thing. Nate is not drowning in Lambos, but he's done a game. He can take what he's learned, move on to the next one, and for the next 5 to 10 years, well, whenever there's a Steam sale, he'll actually sell some copies and see some revenue from that. But of course, it does enable breakout hits like Manor Lords that previously we just couldn't really do in that way because
that game actually looks sick, I'm not gonna lie.
So, don't know about you, but I don't want our best and brightest to be stuck with over 20 meetings a week. I would rather they make smaller games, ones that are more personally motivating, that actually let them cook. And so I put it to you. Do you have a game like that from a solo dev or a very small team that is just that energy encapsulated from this year? Let me know down in the comments. Of course, there's been plenty of news, a lot of goings on. Check out this video next.
100% agree. I would definitely prefer a smaller game that's done right and with a lot of passion and love than a huge game, huge like Starfield, quote unquote, pretty much be this massive pile of shit.
Hey guys, if you like the video, make sure you head over to the page, hit that like button, scroll over, smash that subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get notified for future video drops, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.